What happens when royal privilege meets Britain's most fearless talk show host? You won't believe what unfolds when Prince Harry sits down with Jonathan Ross, and everything goes spectacularly wrong. This isn't just another celebrity meltdown. This is the moment a member of the royal family completely loses control on live television, leading to the most shocking walkout in British TV history. Before we get into this incredible story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, because you're not going to believe what unfolds when these two powerhouses clash in the most explosive confrontation ever captured on camera. Last night's episode of The Jonathon Ross Show started innocently enough, with the Duke of Sussex settling into the iconic red chair, flashing his trademark smile to the studio audience. But what began as what seemed like a standard celebrity appearance quickly descended into chaos that had producers scrambling and viewers across the nation glued to their screens in absolute disbelief. The tension was palpable from the moment Jonathan Ross leaned forward with that mischievous glint in his eye that regular viewers know all too well. "Harry," Ross began, his voice carrying that familiar mix of charm and provocation, "let's talk about your recent statements regarding the media. You've been quite vocal about privacy, yet you seem to be everywhere these days. Books, interviews, Netflix series. Some might say you can't have it both ways." Prince Harry's demeanor shifted almost immediately, his relaxed posture stiffening as his jaw tightened. "Jonathan, I think there's a fundamental misunderstanding here. Speaking out about institutional racism and abuse isn't the same as seeking publicity. There's a difference between controlled narrative and media harassment." But Ross wasn't backing down, sensing the perfect opportunity to dig deeper. "Controlled narrative, that's an interesting phrase, Harry. Some would argue that's exactly what you're doing now, controlling the narrative to paint yourself as the victim while simultaneously profiting from royal revelations. Isn't that a bit hypocritical?" The studio audience fell silent, the atmosphere growing thick with tension as Harry's face flushed with anger. "Hypocritical? I've watched my family protect an institution that protected my Uncle Andrew while throwing my wife under the bus. If speaking the truth makes me hypocritical in your eyes, then so be it." Ross leaned back slightly, clearly relishing the moment. "But Harry, let's be honest here. You've made millions from these revelations. Your book deal, the Netflix series, the interviews you've monetized family dysfunction. Some might say you've become the very thing you claim to despise about the media." That's when something snapped in Prince Harry. His voice rose noticeably, cutting through the studio air like a blade. "How dare you reduce my trauma to a business transaction? You have no idea what it was like growing up in that goldfish bowl, watching my mother being hunted by photographers, seeing my wife driven to the brink of suicide by racist coverage that my own family refused to address." The confrontation was escalating rapidly, and Ross, ever the seasoned broadcaster, pressed his advantage. "But Harry, you chose to air these grievances publicly rather than handle them privately. You've accused your family of racism, of neglect, of institutional cruelty, all while they maintain their dignified silence. Doesn't that strike you as unfair?" Harry's hands were visibly shaking now, his voice cracking with emotion and rage. "Dignified silence? You call protecting a pedophile and abandoning a pregnant woman facing death threats dignified? That's not dignity, Jonathan. That's complicity." The audience gasped audibly, and even Ross seemed momentarily taken aback by the raw fury in Harry's response. But the veteran host quickly regained his composure, sensing he was on the verge of television gold. "Strong words, Harry. But let me ask you this. If the royal family is as toxic as you claim, why do you still use your royal title? Why haven't you renounced it completely, if you truly want to distance yourself from the institution?" This question hit Harry like a physical blow. He stood up abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the studio floor. "Because that title is my birthright. It's not something I should have to give up because my family chose institutional racism over protecting their own daughter-in-law." Ross remained seated, his voice calm but cutting. "So, you want to have your cake and eat it too? Criticize the institution while benefiting from its privileges? That sounds exactly like what you're accusing them of doing." The words hung in the air like a challenge, and Harry's face went from red to almost purple with rage. "You don't get it, do you? None of you get it. I tried to work within the system. I tried to modernize it, to make it relevant, to address its problems from the inside. But they stonewalled me at every turn because change threatens their power structure. Ross's eyebrows raised skeptically. Or perhaps, Harry, they stonewalled you because your ideas weren't as brilliant as you thought they were. Perhaps they recognized that a young man with no real-world experience outside of royal privilege might not be the best person to revolutionize a 1,000-year-old institution. The insult landed with devastating precision. Harry's voice became dangerously quiet, each word dripping with venom. No real-world experience? I served my country in Afghanistan. I've worked with veterans, with disadvantaged youth, with AIDS patients. What have you done, Jonathon, besides make jokes for a living? Now it was Ross's turn to show some steel. His voice remained level, but there was an edge to it that cut through the studio. I've never claimed to be anything other than an entertainer, Harry. I've never positioned myself as a victim while simultaneously attacking my family on the world stage. I've never profited from airing my personal grievances while claiming moral high ground. Harry began pacing behind his chair now, his composure completely shattered. You think this is about profit? You think I wanted any of this? I wanted a normal life for my family, away from the racism and the institutional cruelty that killed my mother and nearly killed my wife. Ross leaned forward again, his voice taking on that familiar provocative tone. But Harry, isn't it convenient that this normal life happens to be incredibly lucrative? Your wife's lifestyle brand, your media deals, your speaking engagements, you've built quite an empire on the foundation of your royal grievances. The accusation seemed to break something fundamental in Harry. He whirled around to face Ross directly, his voice now a shout that echoed through the studio. My wife nearly died because of the racist coverage that your industry perpetuated. She was suicidal, Jonathon. And when we asked for help, for protection, for basic human decency, we were told to grin and bear it for the good of the institution. Ross's response was measured but devastating. And yet, Harry, here you are, using that very same media industry that you claim nearly destroyed your wife to tell your story. You've given exclusive interviews to the biggest networks, signed deals with major streaming platforms, written best-selling books. If the media is so toxic, why are you so eager to engage with it when it serves your purposes? This question seemed to stun Harry into momentary silence. When he finally spoke, his voice was hoarse with emotion. Because nobody else would tell our truth. The palace machinery, the courtiers, the press officers, they all work together to control the narrative, to make us the villains while protecting the real perpetrators. Ross wasn't letting up. But whose truth is it really, Harry? Yours? Your wife's? Or the version that sells the most books and generates the most streaming revenue? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you found a very profitable way to monetize your family trauma. That was the final straw. Harry's face contorted with rage as he pointed an accusatory finger at Ross. How dare you question my motives? You sit here in your comfortable studio, making jokes and collecting paychecks, while I've sacrificed everything, my family, my country, my inheritance to protect the woman I love and speak truth to power. Ross's response was swift and cutting. Sacrificed everything? Harry, you live in a mansion in California. You have multi-million-dollar media deals. You're invited to the most exclusive events in Hollywood. If that's sacrifice, then I'd like to know what you consider privilege. The studio was electric with tension as Harry began gathering himself to leave. You know what, Jonathon? This is exactly why nothing ever changes. People like you would rather tear down those who speak uncomfortable truths than address the real issues. The racism, the institutional cruelty, the protection of predators, none of that matters as long as you can score cheap points for entertainment. Ross stood up now too, his voice carrying across the studio. Harry, the only person here trying to score points is you. You came on this show to promote your latest project, to control the narrative, to play the victim once again. But when faced with legitimate questions about your choices and contradictions, you resort to emotional outbursts and accusations. Harry was now moving toward the edge of the set, his security detail becoming visibly alert. Legitimate questions. You've done nothing but attack my character, question my motives, and minimize the genuine trauma that my family has endured. This isn't journalism, it's character assassination disguised as entertainment. Ross called after him, his voice carrying a note of finality. Harry, the character assassination is what you've been doing to your own family for the past few years. I'm simply asking you to account for your choices and their consequences." But Harry was done. He turned back one final time, his voice filled with disgust and fury. "You want accountability? Here's your accountability. I'm done with this circus. I'm done with people like you who profit from our pain while pretending to seek truth. You're no better than the tabloid journalists you pretend to be above." And with that devastating final salvo, Prince Harry stormed off the set, leaving Jonathan Ross standing alone, the studio audience in stunned silence, and television history forever changed. The most explosive royal meltdown ever captured on live television had just reached its shocking conclusion, with Britain's most controversial prince walking away from what was supposed to be a simple promotional appearance, but instead became the most dramatic confrontation in talk show history.